Hey everyone, you're listening to Party Time, My Golf Story with Kevin Walsh and whatever special guest he has today. You can check me out on episode 9 of the podcast. Today I'm wearing Grayson clothes while I'm out practicing because I believe in look good, play good. And follow me on Instagram, Sophia Warren Golf, and hope you enjoy the rest of the show.
It's Party Time, My Golf Story, brought to you by Party Drinks. Classically designed golf drinks for golfers by golfers. And the golf real estate pros Gene Walsh and Vince Visicaro. For your Southwest Florida real estate needs, check them out at suncoastdreams.com. Now here's your host, Kevin Walsh.
Hey everyone, welcome to the program. John Riley is our guest here on Party Time, My Golf Story. He is the author of The Last Amateur, My Golf Story, a biography on legendary amateur golfer Jay Sigel. Jay died of cancer a little more than a year ago. We are recording this on Wednesday, April 22nd, and the book is soon to be released in just a matter of days. And when we talk about Jay Sigel, we really are talking about the second coming of Bobby Jones in amateur golf. I'm going to let John go through the list. Now, I grew up in Philadelphia where Jay was from and lived his entire life, and I knew the legend of it. And if you don't know the legend of it, you're going to want to read this book because it gets into all the details of it, just the incredible amateur record he had, and then later a professional record when he played on the senior PGA Tour. Won 9 times, $9 million in earnings. But the amateur stuff it's just going to make your head explode how good it was. Before we go any further, if you have not subscribed to the podcast, would you do so? That makes a big difference to our sponsors. And it also helps with the algorithms. Folks, it's all about numbers. It's all about algorithms and all that stuff. So if you don't mind, if you would take a moment and do that, it would go a long way. Big thanks to Party Drinks. If you're looking for a drink alternative on the golf course, try a Party for golfers, by golfers. This is much better than the stuff named the hard seltzer stuff named after a time of day and crustaceans. All that jazz. Party is for you. If golf real estate purchasing is in your plans, no better time to buy than right now, especially in Lakewood National Golf Club, where this podcast originates from. And nobody better than the golf real estate pros of Gene Walsh, Samantha Walsh, and Vince Visicaro from suncoastdreams.com, a division of Fine Properties. And if all that golf and all that golf talk has you tired, then go to BioLit Spa in downtown Sarasota. Get yourself a massage, cold water plunge, hot tub, red light therapy, all that great stuff. It's all there for the taking. My man, John Riley, joining us from Wilmington, Delaware. Well, first of all, let's talk about the grilling session. You had a grilling session. How did the burgers come out?
They're good, medium rare. Just
nice.
Throw a little red relish on there and some ketchup and onion, ready to go.
Okay, so you are the grill master at home. Like when it comes to anything on the grill, do you let anybody touch the grill? That is your domain.
That's
and
my
nobody
domain.
goes near.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
I don't do a lot, but I do that.
Okay. Perfect stuff. Just to start things off, John, if you will, can you just, even if you have to abbreviate, because an abbreviated version of Jay Sigel's accomplishments in golf are just going to blow people away. Why don't you just go through the highlights real quickly?
Kind of funny. I brought you a little prop. She has a friend by the name of Brian Simmons, Club Winston Trails, not far from where Jay lived, down in Delray in the winter months. And he gave lessons to Jay in the later part of his professional career, helped him with his game a little bit. And they were pretty good friends. And I got to meet Brian. When I first saw this club, he put together a club with a grip on it, with all of Jay Sigel's record and wins on it. And it's it's pretty amazing. You just start up the top, and it has Pennsylvania Amateurs 11 times, Pennsylvania Amateur Champion. And then he stopped playing in 79. This is 3 years before he won his first National Amateur Championship. Philadelphia Amateur twice. The Porter Cup in New York 3 times. Sunny Hannah Amateur 3 times. British amateur, 1979, beat Scott Hoke in the finals. U.S. amateur twice, U.S. mid-amateur 3 times, Northeast amateur 3 times. Great tournament up in Rhode Island at one of my Philadelphia Open 6 times, Pennsylvania Open 4 times. Of course, there's a lot of things that aren't on here, but
so it wasn't hyperbole what I said in the beginning. It's going to make your head explode just how good he was.
No, I mean, you can add to that. How about 9 Crump Cups? 9
at Pine Valley. Okay, there we go. Multiple Masters appearances.
Another national field. Yep.
9-time Walker Cupper. Walker
11
Cup.
straight Masters. Low amateur 3 times. Low amateur in the U.S. Open. Low amateur in the British Open, the Open Championship.
Holy smokes. Okay, so when people used to joke in Pennsylvania, like about, hey, are you playing in the J next week? They were referring to the Pennsylvania Open or the Pennsylvania Amateur because he won all that stuff so many times. They could have named the stuff after him, and it wouldn't have been a stretch. The book is about to be released, and there's a Fred Ridley quote in it, and I know he's going to be there at the release of the book. 2-part question. First of all, how did that come about?
Well, first of all, Jay gave me a list, maybe 20, 25 people in the world of golf, and with their phone numbers or emails, and said, you may want to talk to them, during the course of the book. And back in March of last year, 2025, about a month before Jay died, he said, have you talked to Ridley yet? He was interested in me talking to Ridley. And I said, well, Jay, I can't help but think that Ridley has his hands full getting ready for the Masters. And I feel a little funny about, contacting him now. And typical Jay, he just sort of nods and grunts. Okay. Mm-hmm. kind of the way he was. But he probably asked me another time, oh, did you ever talk to Ridley? No, Jay, I'm waiting until after the Masters. And things were going downhill for Jay at that time, at Masters time, although he did do an interview with Harry Donahue on April 1. So only 19 days before he passed. And it was all about the Masters. We did an event in Philadelphia for the first tee of Philadelphia called Philadelphians at the Masters. And the feature attraction was an interview with Jay, who wasn't going to be with us in another 19 days. But he got himself up for that. It was kind of funny, not funny, but just interesting as I would speak back and forth with Jay. He wanted to know the questions that were going to be asked. He was still undergoing chemotherapy. He would take a nap in the afternoon. He would say to me, now I'll be okay from this hour to this hour. And so we kind of worked everything around that. And Harry, my great friend Harry, was no longer with us. The first question he asked him was something that we didn't talk about. Oh, Jay, who'd you play with in your first round at the Masters? And you could just see Jay going, oh, no, I can't remember. It was so long ago, Harry. So anyway, that was kind of the start of that adventure. But where were we now? Sorry.
So getting in contact with Fred Ridley, the chairman of Augusta National. So Jay's pestering you about, did you get in touch with him? How did you eventually make a connection with him?
So
and what did it lead to?
Now, remember the drama at Augusta last year. Rory wins, finally accomplishes the Grand Slam, finally wins the Masters, the emotional playoff with Justin Rose. It was, certainly one of the great Masters of all times, I think anybody would say. And then it was almost the same drill again this year, just didn't have the Grand Slam involved. So, I'm thinking to myself, I've never met Fred Ridley, doesn't know who John Riley is. And I'm thinking geez, I better give him more time. But I know Jay is kind of anxious. Did you talk to Fred? And, it's not clear. I'm just down to the point where Jay and I were only trading texts back and forth. And I put in I had his email, and I emailed him not Monday after the Masters, but Tuesday after the Masters. And I introduced myself. I said who I was. And of course, I put Jay's name in the subject line. Within 10, 15 minutes, a note comes back from Ridley. How about 4:00 tomorrow? I will send you a Zoom link. And the next day I spoke to him for 45 minutes, face to face. He was already home in Tampa, calling me from his office. And he was all Jay. It was like we talked for, 2 minutes about Augusta. Obviously, he was very pleased with the tournament. And then we moved on, and, he filled the next 45 minutes with Jay stories and his Jay stories. And it was just, it was great. And I had occasion to follow up with him multiple times over the last year. And then when we were considering, when we do this book launch at Aronimink, might be a great idea to have either a panel or have a important speaker, connected to Jay. And the first name that I wrote on a list of names was Fred Ridley. And there were some great names on that list. And we kind of agreed, let's try for Fred. And Betty Sigel called Fred, and he got back to her very shortly thereafter and said, sure, I'll do that. And we got a date at Aronimink, and he said, I'll be there. And just within the last couple of days, I've talked to Fred again. He's working on his talk. I mean, he's just a very serious, dedicated guy.
He is. His quote, which I know is in the book, "We will never see his like again." That is so profound, isn't it?
That's an interesting story. So I actually, came up with the name The Last Amateur. I had mentioned it to Jay 2 years before. We had lunch together, and he wanted to talk to me about doing a book, but he never was in any way specific about, would you consider writing the book? I think this was while I was actually interviewing him for the Heinemann book. And that's how all this came about. And I said to him, I said, Jay, if I were you, I mean, you're one of the great names in the history of golf. I would get somebody who's already, a very prominent golf writer, not just a little old John Riley from Delaware. And again, typical Jay, just kind of nod and grunt, okay. Mm-hmm. So, that during the course of that lunch that day, I said, if I ever did do a book with you, I got an idea for a title. He said, what's that? I said, The Last Amateur. Now, where that thought came from with me was really doing the Heinemann book, A Will to Win. That group, that Heinemann competed against, in fact, obviously lost his only time he made the finals of the U.S. Amateur. He lost to the great Harvey Ward. But he competed with and against the likes of Charlie Coe, who finished second in the Masters, Billy Joe Patton, who missed a playoff for the Masters with Hogan and Snead by a single shot. I mean, these were guys who every day competed at the top of the game against the pros. And, I called it sort of the second golden age of amateur golf, if you consider, Bobby Jones, the golden age of amateur golf. I just always had this thought that you'll never see this again, because the young people came along, the young guys, nobody wanted to play, the amateur game any longer. So it went from the days of Bobby Jones and Francis Ouimet, when it dominated golf. Those were the big stories, the amateur stories. And they were some of the finest players in the world, to today where, you have great amateurs, but like a Nicklaus, they're changing changing over to the professional game at like age 22, like Arnie did after winning the U.S. Amateur also. But then the next generation of the young kids, particularly as a result of Palmer, television, and money, said, well, I'm not going to stick around and try to win the Northeast Amateur. I'm going to, as soon as I get out of school, I'm going to go play the golf tour. So anyway, during the course of the interview with Ridley, I happened to mention to him, or he asked me, well, what's the, no, he didn't ask me yet. I'm sorry. He made the statement in talking about this dynamic of what happens in the game today and how you don't see people like Jay anymore. And that's when he came out and he said, the amateur golf will never see his like again. And I said, Fred, that's kind of interesting that you made that point, because the working title of the book that Jay and I have agreed on, although we haven't finalized it, the working title of the book has been The Last Amateur. And Ridley said, yep, I see that. I can see that. We'll never see anybody like Jay Sigel again.
That's true. And for a lot of reasons, like amateur golf, even amateur golf, as we know, it really isn't amateur anymore because of NIL money. You can accept prize money to a certain limit in the amateur ranks and everything. But back when I played it, when you played it, when Jay played it, you got nothing. You paid for everything yourself, and maybe you got a nice trophy with it.
No, absolutely. I mean, the cost of being an amateur and trying to play it at the top of the game, like Heinemann and Sigel both did, was expensive. Mm-hmm. To my read of their two careers was that it was a little bit more challenging for Jay, actually, than it was for Hyman, because by time Bill started really, moving into the top echelons of national amateur golf, he'd become pretty established in his business and was pretty successful. He had a great client base. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that the costs and the travel and all of that was quite the burden to Bill that it seemed to be in those early days with Jay when he was trying to get his career going in the insurance business. And he had, they were having kids. They had 3 girls. They're trying to raise the family. So it definitely, Jay felt the strain. We talked about that, a little bit during the course of the book. At different times it was difficult. He always, for instance, found housing in all these tournaments he went to. He didn't stay in hotels. They typically have a list of families in the area that were willing to put up the players. Like if he went to Sunny Ann, if he went to the Porter Cup or the Northeast Amateur, or down to the North and South, whatever it might be, he would always stay with somebody, and he always drove. In fact, I had a great interview with Buddy Marucci because they played so much golf together. Buddy had a great line. He said to me, and this is in the book, because one of the features of the book is we took like some of these interviews, just like with Ridley, and we turned them into inserts, segments in the book. So you had this sort of objective third-person account of Jay and his life and career spaced out throughout the book, in addition to the rest of the book being in Jay's own voice. And Marucci said to me, he said, we played together as partners a lot. We were opponents a lot. And they said, and I have to tell you that partner part went much better than the opponent part, but that was not unique to me. So he, and he talked quite a bit about, the matches with Jay. In fact, one of the features of Jay, to a lot of people in the game, was sort of the intimidation factor. He was so quiet. He was so stoic. He was so in control. He was so good under pressure, that he just had a kind of an aura about him. And a lot of people talked as I went through the book about him being intimidated. And he was a big guy. Marucci said, well, and obviously Buddy, among other things, is famous for taking Tiger to 36 holes in the U.S. Amateur Final. Mm-hmm. So Buddy can play golf. But he said, people would say that Jay was intimidating in the amateur game the way Tiger was intimidating in the professional game. And he said, but I never saw it that way. Simply put, I would say they were just better than the rest of us. Just simple as that. And that's a quote actually in the book from Buddy, actually on the back of the book cover. There you go. I can show it to you right there.
Yeah, show me the front of the book and hold up the front. That is such a good picture. Was that the second U.S. Amateur that Jay won?
Yeah, that's right. That's out in Chicago.
Back to back, by the way.
Yeah, and he won. Typical. That's another thing about Jay. He won a ton of matches in extra holes and overtime. He just refused to lose. But he also crushed opponents. I mean, both of his wins, both finals of the U.S. Amateur, he won 8 and 7. He just didn't give people a chance. He once won the Pennsylvania Amateur by 18 shots. 18 shots. I mean, there's almost no such thing.
Well, I'm going to hold up the other book because you made mention to some other great amateurs. So this, I'm going to take you out just so everybody can see it. You're still with me here. This is A Will to Win. That's Big Bill Hyman, also written by John Riley. And
at the top of it, by the way, is a quote from Jay, if you notice. At the top of the book.
Yeah, you're right. I thought I knew Bill Hyman until I read this book. It's not just a golf story. Everyone can learn from Bill's struggles and perseverance. Hey, while I'm holding this, tell me this, because I remember you telling me the story that in Bill Hyman's book, A Will to Win, Jay read it off Kinko's copies in a weekend because you told him to read it. Do you think, based on his health and his age, that your book about Bill Hyman kind of prompted him to get going on an autobiography of his own before it was too late?
Now, other friends have told me that Jay talked, over the years to them about doing a book sometime. So it wasn't new. But where it originally started was I had asked Jay through another friend, because I really didn't know him well. I mean, I'd certainly met him and talked to him several times over the many years, but I didn't have his phone number or contact. I never socialized with the guy. I only played with him one time. And I went through a friend, and he said, "Oh, I'll connect you up with Jay." And I asked Jay if he would read my book on Porky Oliver, how he played the game, and consider giving it an endorsement. And he actually took about 4 to 6 weeks to read that book. I was very, very anxious to get feedback from him. But he loved the Oliver book, and he loved Oliver the character. In fact, when he first heard I was doing a book on Hyman, he goes, "I don't understand. Why are you doing a book on this guy? He's nothing like," and he points to the book on Oliver, and he goes, "He's nothing like this. Hyman's like me. He's like beige like me," like he didn't have this sparkling Porky personality. And I said, "I don't know, Jay. I think when you read the book on Bill, even though you knew him a little bit, you'll find out you didn't know him that well." And stop
for a second, John. That's the beauty of a book, is because you hold it in your hands and you have time to reflect on it. And once it goes down, there's some thought and just all these things, descriptions and everything sound so much and read so much more profound. Would you agree with that?
Oh yeah, no question. I mean, I'm a reader and a writer. I mean, I watched every minute of the Masters, I'd probably say, but that's about it for me. I mean, I don't watch a lot of television. I read a lot of history. And to me, there's nothing better. I don't know if in my lifetime I've ever gone to see a movie and said that movie was as good as the book. I mean, to me, the book's always better. So that's just the way it is.
The book is always better. There's no doubt about it. Although I will say The Perfect Storm by Sebastian Junger was almost as good as the book. And Jaws maybe as well, but you're right. Usually the movie's not nearly as good as the book because they do the Hollywoodization and all that crap, and it just doesn't work. Let's talk about history, though. Jay had a pivotal moment in life, a profound moment in his life. But why don't you describe the accident and what that did to his golfing career?
So to lay the groundwork for that. I mean, Jay at the time, he was like the next coming of Jack Nicklaus. He, or you might better say Arnold Palmer, because he met with Arnold Palmer at Pebble Beach when he played in the Bing Crosby Pro-Am, and he was invited to that as a junior golfer because he won the International JC Championship. Every bit as big a tournament as the U.S. Junior Championship, which he lost in the finals to my friend Charlie McDowell. Charlie will actually be there. Charlie's 81 now, or be 81 in June. And he was actually over a year younger than Jay when he beat him on the last hole for the national championship. But so Jay had a phenomenal reputation, recruited to go to Houston, which is by far the number one collegiate golf program in the country. And that January, he's out at Pebble Beach. He's not happy at Houston. And he decides to take the step of talking to Arnold Palmer about Wake Forest. And he goes up to him. He's like, Arnie, right? He's talking to people like Bing Crosby and Bob Hope. And he says, Arnie, if you get a minute, I wanted to, here during the tournament, I wanted to see if I could ask you a couple of questions about Wake Forest. And Arnie said, how about right now? He excuses himself and he sits in a corner with Jay for 45 minutes, talking to him about his love for Wake Forest. And Jay, of course, immediately decides, I want to go to Wake Forest. I'm out of here. Not only that, it's closer to home for him. So he goes to Wake Forest. Again, he's immediately a star. He wins. He gets there, by the way, and he cannot play. He's ineligible because of the transfer. Mm-hmm. What's he do? He goes out and he qualifies for the Greater Greensboro Open. He's Jay Sigel. He's not like you and I will be trying to get a date.
And by the way, he was on the Arnold Palmer scholarship.
Well, that's the next part of it. So
okay,
he wasn't yet, mm-hmm. because he got out there, and so his first season, the scholarship had been formed, but it had never been awarded yet. And that was when it was determined. Obviously, I think they wanted to make sure they kept Jay there. And they said, well, we're going to make you the first recipient. And so that was a pretty big deal that had happened. He immediately went out in his first year of eligibility. He won the Atlantic Coast Conference Championship by 4 shots. He's just the top of the food chain in the world of golf. He can play with anybody. He goes home, by the way, in '66 and plays an exhibition with Arnie and beats him at Lanark. Tom Brookshire was playing in the group, if you remember Tom. Tom Brookshire and John Facenda were both in the group that day with Arnie and Jay.
Oh my gosh! Okay, just for those that don't know, John Facenda was the voice of God, the frozen tundra, Lambeau Field, and Tom Brookshire, broadcaster as well. What was his sports background before the announcing?
Brookshire was a linebacker for the Eagles. He was on the national championship team. Mm-hmm. And then he was a Philadelphia sportscaster. All those guys. It was a little bit of Jay's upbringing because he played his golf as a junior at Bala and all the guys from WCAU used to come over there. Jack Whitaker, Chris Schenkel. These are the guys that, kind of put their arm around him as a boy and gave him some counsel and advice. And
wow, what a place to be. Now, for those that are not, for those outside the Philadelphia area, Bala is this little club just on the edge of Philadelphia, right by City Avenue. And I would describe it as like a bowling alley. I loved Bala. Tiny greens, but a short course, but nearby to everything. It's like a good diner, right? It would work for anybody.
Yeah. So the original question was his injury. So I'll go there. We could go off on all these tangents. By the way, we could talk about Bala for a while.
Now let's get to the hand. What happened to his hand?
So the golf coach. So Jay is behind in school, and instead of going home and playing golf and doing some caddying all summer long, he has to go to summer school. And this is right after he won the ACC championship. He has to go to summer school. And he's going back to, he was in a fraternity, KA, and he was going back to the house where he was staying. There were some people staying there during the summer, again, going to summer school. And he was in a rush because the golf coach dropped him off kind of like out front, as I remember the story, and Jay ran in to change his clothes. He had picked them up from class, and they were headed to the course. And I guess there was a student coming the other way, and Jay put his hand out, and his hand went right through the glass. Of course, when those things happen, at first you don't know how badly you're injured. He grabs his hand, not understanding how badly he has been cut. But it's going to take 90 stitches in a 3-hour operation to close this wound. And with blood all over the place, he runs out to the car, and the coach thinks he's kidding, like he's covered himself in ketchup. He's telling Jay, stop fooling around. Then all of a sudden he realizes that he's not kidding, and Jay is going into shock. So he takes him over to the athletic building where the trainer is. The trainer immediately throws a tourniquet on Jay's arm. And the trainer happened to know like the home telephone number of the one orthopedic surgeon in town, and gets him at home. And the guy rushes into the hospital and begins this 3-hour operation. The cuts were so bad. The kid that was coming the other way, his fraternity brother, at one point, they sent him back to the fraternity house to retrieve the skin. They needed to sew it back onto his hand and his finger. So,
wow.
But he had left flesh all over the glass and on the door. So they put him back together again. He was in the hospital for 9 days in recovery. And father picked him up. They took him home. They put him in a very awkward cast where his arm, so it's his left hand, and was pointing up in the air, if you can imagine that, and all casted together so he couldn't move it. And one of the reasons for that is because the cut had severed the ulnar nerve in his hand, which obviously provides the flexibility and the feeling in the last two fingers of your left hand. Obviously, completely critical to the golf swing and being able to hold onto a golf club. Now, the great thing about Jay, and he'll, again, the story's in the book, but I mean, he sinks into depression, thinks it's kind of like the end of his world, end of his life. never going to play golf again. If I can, at what level? And I guess after several weeks, he gets bored to death, and he asks his mother to take him out to Bala. And he goes out to Bala, and he starts putting on the putting green one-handed. And the way he tells the story, he says, by the time I finished in the fall, I could beat anybody in the club one-handed putting. And he said, and I learned a lot about putting. But he didn't really hit a golf shot that the accident was right around the 4th of July. He didn't really hit a golf shot until, I'm going to say, late October. He went out with his father on like a little pitch and putt course. He put like a sponge in his glove, and he put 2 gloves on. And so he tried to practice and play that way for a while. Very, very painful. Eventually got back down to school. And there's a little segment in the book, I think it was November, the very end of October, that one of the kids on the golf team said he was out with Jay and that Jay shot a 78. So he's still playing golf with a couple of gloves on. And, he just keeps going. The amazing thing is that the following spring, he makes the team. He gets invited. He's not the Jay of the year before, an ACC champion, but he gets invited to go to the Florida Intercollegiate Championship down in the Fort Myer area. And so now it's been, about 9 months since the accident, 10 months. He wins it. And it almost wasn't a good thing for him. He won it. And then after that, he just keeps, having these setbacks all the time, and he continued with a lot of pain. Actually, his pain never went away, and he never had full feeling restored in his hand. I spoke to his senior tour caddy, guy by the name of Kirk Rothrock, and Kirk said to me that he can remember being on the West Coast in windy, cold conditions trying to talk Jay out of playing because his hand was numb and he couldn't feel it. And the reason he was trying to talk him out of playing, even though Jay wanted to continue to play, is that it actually, if you didn't finish in the money, that sort of thing, it hurt your tour status. So he literally was like not helping himself at that point in his career. So that's all those, 30, 40 years later, he's still dealing with the pain in his hand.
Wow. And then after that, he got his game back, won 2 U.S. amateurs, played 9 Walker Cups, won 3 mid-amateurs, played in 11 straight Masters. It's just a testament. John Riley is our guest here on Party Time, My Golf Story. He is the author of The Last Amateur, My Life in Golf, which is the story, the autobiography that he co-wrote along with Jay Sigel, the second coming of Bobby Jones, and who a lot of people thought would be Jack Nicklaus until he put his hand through that glass door. John, we're running a little bit late. Would you mind sticking around for a 2-part thing? Can we just thank the sponsors and then we'll just continue with the interview in just a couple minutes?
Sure.
All right. John Riley has been our guest here on Party Time, My Golf Story, and his book is just about to be released. We're recording this part 1 version on Wednesday, April 22nd. I want to get something off and get that up. If you're interested in the book, and you should read it. If you are a fan of golf, especially amateur golf, this is the first book you should read. Run to get it. Don't walk to get it. Big thanks to our title sponsor, Party Drinks. If you're looking for a drink alternative on the golf course, try a Party. For golfers, by golfers. If golf real estate is in your plans, then get in contact with the folks at suncoastdreams.com. Gene Walsh, Vince Vizzacaro, and Samantha Walsh, a division of fine properties in the greater Sarasota area. And if all that golf and golf talk has got you tuckered out, check out Violet Spa in downtown Sarasota. For John Riley, I'm Kevin Walsh. Part 2 coming up soon. So stay right here. All right, John, we're just stay where you are. I'm gonna like do a restart on the program.
Got it. If you want, why don't we can maybe get into some of the names?
Yeah. We're gonna get. So I'll like previously say we left off when Jay put his hand through the glass and everything. But then he got into a storied amateur career, later turned pro. But I want to talk about the influence of Jack Nicklaus on his life, Arnold Palmer on his life. I want your story about the shoes. Maybe I'll tell my story about the time I played golf with him, and that was something. All right, so it's just going to be a restart on things. All right, I just got to make a note for producer. All right, so it's just going to be like the beginning, John. You're going to disappear, but I still got you, and we're still recording.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, Andrew. This is the restart. Coming down 3, 2, 1. Hey, everyone. Welcome to the program. This is part 2 of our interview with John Riley. He is the author of The Last Amateur, My Golf and Life, which is the autobiography of the late Jay Sigel. Who was Jay Sigel? He was the second coming of Bobby Jones. He was thought to be the next Jack Nicklaus until an unfortunate accident in which he put his hand through glass and hurt his hand so badly, had a lengthy surgery, 90 plus stitches and everything, long recovery, and then went on even after that to play some of the greatest golf in his life as an amateur, 2-time U.S. amateur champion back-to-back, won a British Amateur Championship, 3 mid-amateurs, 9-time Walker Cup captain, just absolutely golfing royalty. Big thanks to our title sponsor, Party Drinks. If you're looking for a drink alternative on the golf course, try a Party. For golfers, by golfers, and way better than those crappy seltzers that you've been drinking on the golf course. If you do not have Party at where you play golf, then get in touch with Paradise Craft Distributors, a division of Fine Properties, which is Paradise. I'm mixing things up. Paradise Craft Distributors is the exclusive distributor of Party across the state of Florida. So talk to the beverage staff, talk to the golf staff, and get yourself set up with some Party. If golf real estate is in your plans, the Golf Real Estate Pros of Gene Walsh, Vince Vizicaro, and Samantha Walsh from suncoaststreams.com, a division of Fine Properties in the greater Sarasota area. They can get you all taken care of with that. And if all that golf has got you tired and everything, go to BioLit Spa in downtown Sarasota, and they'll help you on the road to recovery. All right. And one more thing. If you haven't subscribed to the podcast, then do that. That helps with the algorithms, and also tell a friend about it. John, welcome back. I enjoyed part 1 of our interview with you with your book, The Last Amateur, My Golf and Life, Jay Sigel. I'm definitely fascinated by him. We left off where he put his hand through the glass at Wake Forest and then had the long recovery and just went on to play absolutely phenomenal golf. And it culminated with a career on the senior PGA Tour in which he won 8 times, $9 million in earnings. But influential people in his life, just prominent names and Jay's connection to them. Why don't we start with Jack Nicklaus? What was his relationship with Jack?
It's interesting. I never really talked to Jay about the genesis of their relationship, but I think it was just a case of mutual respect. In some ways, Jay, I would say, emulated Jack. Just a supreme gentleman in every way in the game, always trying to live up to the highest standards, playing at the highest level, enormous respect, recipients of the Bob Jones Award for, the impact and on the game. So I just think that even if it wasn't a closeness from a distance, it was such that when Jay decided that it was time to seriously think, this was at the age of about 48, that what do I do for my, what do I do in life next? He decided to see if Jack would help him with a decision. And he went and he actually spent 2 days with Jack. They played golf together. He spent time with Barbara. They definitely developed a closeness. I mean, while we were doing the book, I can remember one day, I think it was Jay's birthday, November 13th, when Jack showed up with a photo with another friend, with them wishing Jay a happy birthday that day. And but anyway, Jack, gave him a lot of good advice. He started the advice by saying, whatever you do, it won't be a bad decision, because if you do go for the senior tour, I think you'll be happy. I think you'll feel good about that. But also, if you stay with the amateur game, that's what you love. So that was kind of the relationship. Jack, I guess, in some ways, like almost like a father figure, trying to guide Jay. One of the things he said specifically to Jay that was that he should keep his insurance practice. Because Jay told him he had good people in the insurance business. Jay was thinking he just, started playing 30 times a year, which was more than double what he was playing at the amateur level, that he just couldn't do two things. And Jack said, no, I think you can. And Jay really was extremely capable of kind of compartmentalizing anyway. And so that was that decision he made was based on advice he received from Jack.
See, that is so compelling. And I saw an interview with Jay years ago in which it must have been the same conversation that you're talking about. And there were other things that came out, and I want to get your take on it. Eventually, they played a lot of golf together, and the interviewer said, was there some money involved? And Jay said, yes, there was. And he's like, and where is that money right now? And Jay had this big grin on his face. He said, yes, I have some of Jack's money. And he was so proud of himself, as would anybody, if you got in Jack Nicklaus's pocket. But speaking of money and Jack's advice on keeping the insurance, I also saw another interview in the past in which the interviewer said, if not for the accident, wouldn't you like to have turned pro because you could have made so much more money, suggesting that there was more money to be made golf than in insurance. And Jay had this other grin on his face, and he said, I'm not sure that I would have made more money playing golf than I have in my business. So how successful was he with the insurance?
Well, I think he was quite successful. I mean, I interviewed several that he worked with. I interviewed clients, but I don't think I never took the step of in some way trying to quantify it. But what I found that was interesting is Jay loved the business. Jay loved being successful in the insurance business and running that business, working with the people. It was very fulfilling for him. It was almost as if he had a second golf career, only it was insurance. Mm-hmm. That really struck me. I mean, he was the same way about his family, about, Betty and the girls. They were all high priorities. Ken Blanchard, who writes the foreword of the book, the famous 2-Minute Manager. That's a funny story, by the way, how they met and knew each other, but they remained lifelong friends. And Ken, as I say, wrote that. And in there, he said, Jay always had, that the priority in his life, or the three priorities in his life, were family, his business, and then golf. And he said in that order. And I think that kind of balance really helped him a lot. I think, he could win a major amateur or a championship, say we're talking the Northeast Amateur, or he could be in the lead. And he'd go back to whoever he was staying with, and he'd get on the phone and talk to clients for a couple hours that night. That was not unusual. So he would weave his business all the time into, his golf life. And I actually think that it kind of helped in a way to be a distraction. I mean, he told me the story of going to the Masters. He had a little bit of an entourage. They sometimes rented 2 homes in Augusta, friends, clients, others that would come with him. And, he said it was great because it created a distraction for him. You didn't just think about the Masters all the time and be focused on every little detail of what you did right or what you did wrong. One of his strengths, tremendous strengths, I think, as a player, as a person, was the ability to almost immediately forget the bad shots. Whatever went wrong, he just had a mental ability to say, okay, that's behind me. What's in front of me? And he did that with, phenomenal success all his life. In fact, at one time, I was doing some research on after he had the comeback at Wake Forest, and I think it was the next time he played in the ACC championship, which was at Pinehurst number 2, and he went out and he birdied the first hole. And in a way, he's defending champion because he missed the following year. And he birdies the first hole, and he then proceeded to go triple bogey, double bogey, bogey. It may have been a little bit later in the round, but it was a very un-Jay-like blow up. And I asked him about it, because we were working on that part of the book. And I said, so what was your reaction to that? He goes, I don't remember that at all. I said, you blew up in the ACC championship. I mean, Jay Sigel makes triple bogey, double bogey. You have no memory of that at all? He said, none whatsoever. He says, I just always put those things behind me. I didn't think about them again.
Well, I think that had something to do with his success and also his. You mentioned in part 1 the intimidation factor, and I wonder if we could drill down a little bit deeper on that. The one time that I played golf with him, it was competitive for me because it was a junior golf tournament. He was one of the sponsors. He was at the peak of his game. He was just removed from his U.S. amateur titles and everything. And I just remember seeing he had huge feet. His feet were like enormous. Maybe 13 or 14, but I'm like, God, this guy has big feet. And he could really hit it. But I thought he would talk more than he did. And I realized, man, he's just really into his golf. Now, the juniors, we were competing, but he was one of the sponsors because it was an insurance youth classic and Jay was an insurance guy. But I think am I capturing the person that I think I know with the person that you found out by dealing with him, writing the book with him, and then others who knew him, just his demeanor on the golf course?
His demeanor on the golf course was pretty famous. He was described in so many different ways. Probably the most common term I heard was stoic. Writers wrote about it all the time. And it did spill over into this idea that he was intimidating. And a lot of folks would talk about that. He certainly wasn't talkative. He just focused on his own business. He had this mentality that, that he didn't want to talk. He just wanted to, show what he could do with his game. And that's what he did. Interesting, when he played Scott Hoke in the finals of the British Amateur, it's like you'd say, okay, well, people wouldn't warm up to Jay because he was so quiet. He didn't engage with people. He was standoffish. It was just who he was. But, the Brits seemed to love that, particularly as compared to Scott Hoke, who wore all his emotions on his sleeve and was just going all over the place. So you ended up with the whole crowd, in favor and thrilled that Jay's, beating Scott Hoke. and getting down on Scott Hoke the whole time. Jay and Scott seemed to have a really good relationship. In fact, they were partners in the Walker Cup just before that. And Jay's golf clubs did not arrive. And he actually played out of Scott Hoke's bag for a day or two before they went on and became partners when his clubs finally showed up. No, that was who he was. He joked when he was on the senior tour a little bit about loosening up, and I really do think he did. And I think when you talk to people that he engaged with later in his career, he almost really sounds more like one of the boys. I don't know how much he went to the bar afterwards for a drink, but they would all talk about him that way. Fun to be around, subtle sense of humor, very warm person, good guy, caring about important things in life, their families. And so he had that side to him. But I think when he was competing, I think part of it was an outgrowth of the fact that he had so much trouble with match play early in his career. I mean, he lost 2 Philadelphia Juniors in the finals. He could never seem to get over the hump in the Philadelphia Amateur. It was very frustrating to him. And he couldn't get anywhere in the U.S. Amateur. I think Brookline was like his 16th U.S. Amateur. I don't think he had ever been past the 3rd round up to that point in time. Then after that, he was rarely not a quarterfinalist. He became a quarterfinalist 8 times. I mean, how many people have ever done that in history? Maybe Chick Evans and Jones and Francis we met. So he probably became the best match play player in golf for almost a decade. But before that, and he actually had a kind of interesting story about it. There was a great amateur won the British at that time who won the British 2 years in a row and played on the British Walker Cup team, Peter McAvoy. And I don't know if you remember that name, but he was a great match play golfer. And when Jay and Scott were playing, he and his partner at Muirfield, he actually brought up to Jay on the course, "Hey, Jay, how come you don't like match play? I always hear you don't like match play." And Jay gave him kind of his standard answer, which was he thought it brought luck into the picture too much. And, if you had a bad hole, there wasn't as much recovery time. He had several, different ways that he explained that he didn't like it, but he used the expression a couple times. He considered it like Russian roulette. But McAvoy said, "I don't know why you feel that way. I think match play is easier." And he said, "Well, why do you think it's easier?" And he said, "Well, I just think it's an easier game." He said, "The way I approach it all the time, I approach it that every hole is sudden death. And if I win that hole, the next hole is sudden death again. I got to win that hole too." And that was literally the week before Jay played Scott Hoke. He had never won a national championship or a championship at that level. And the next week, he wins the British Amateur, wins the amateur championship.
Sometimes it takes a conversation.
There was no stopping him after that. None.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You can say that again. What's the story with you and golf shoes and Jay?
I do tell that in the introduction. I do. So it's Jay's voice with a whole series of inserts from Jay's peers, caddies, and others throughout the book. But I do write both the intro and the epilogue. And I do tell the story in the intro just to give a little bit of personal touch to it, that my brother and I, when I was in college, he actually had a car. I had nothing, but we were both working for the same company that summer. It was one of those summer jobs to try to, money to go back to school. And he entered us somehow or other, got us an invitation into the Chester Valley Invitational. And you took a look at that field at this thing when we got up there. And I mean, it was the who's who of Philadelphia golf. Now, I mean, I was a decent, University of Delaware golfer, and probably a 1 or 2 handicap at the time. But you're looking at this field with Lou Riggs, Gordon Brewer, Jay Sigel. I mean, this is like the all-star team at Philadelphia Golf. And my brother and I actually played really, really well. We were in second going into the last round, 54-hole medal. And Jay and his partner were always actually behind us, chasing us. And they caught us in a tie for third place. So we finished, I think, 4 back of Gordon Brewer's team and 1 behind the second place. And then it was us. And they had, as the prize for third place, was 2 pairs of golf shoes for the 2 contestants. And I mean, we didn't have 2 sticks to rub together. I played with hand-me-down clubs and everything else, and shoes were a mess. And thought, wow, look at those brand new golf shoes, brand new pair of FootJoys. I'd kill for these things. And they announce, since we're tied with Jay, they announced that they want to have a playoff. I honestly think that they just wanted to see Jay play the first hole. Of course, that was not good news to Kurt and I. Kurt and I went, oh, my God, how are we going to beat Jay Sigel? Even though in theory, we tied him for 3 rounds with his partner. You figure he's going to turn it on in on a playoff hole. And he was sitting like a table away from him. I had never met him in my life, just been reading about him all my life. And he gets up, walks over to her table, and he goes, "You 2 guys, the Riley brothers?" We looked up at him, and, there's the great Jay Sigel. And we said, yeah, we are. He said, we're thinking we're going to concede and just give you guys the shoes, if that's okay with you. Oh, my God. Oh, my God. We're high-fiving each other all the way back to Wilmington in the car. We were so excited. So that was my original I think that was the only time in Jay's life he ever conceded a match, and it was to me.
That's and you held on to those shoes for about 10 years, and probably every time you look down at them, you're like, thanks,
I wore
Jay.
those shoes.
Thank you, Jay.
For college.
Yeah.
And after, right through the Army, too.
John Riley is our guest here on Party Time, My Golf Story, brought to you by Party Drinks, the golf real estate pros at suncoastdreams.com, a division of fine properties in the greater Sarasota area. Gene Walsh, Samantha Walsh, and Vince Vizzacaro, and Violet Spa in downtown Sarasota. If we could, like, you had to reach out to a lot. Well, I'll get to Billy Andrade in a second because I love Billy. Everything he says is funny, especially when he makes fun of his boy Brad Faxon, calls him names, which I won't use that language here. But Billy can be a loose cannon, as you know. But Jay passed away during the writing of the book. What was that like, and how were you able to continue without him?
Yeah, I mean, when I first met with Jay and Betty, and they said they wanted to do the book and said they wanted to do it in the first person, right away I'm thinking to myself, by the way, kind of a funny story. So they're sitting there, and I had co-authored a book with my friend Kevin Riley, who played for the Philadelphia Eagles. And so it was all written in the first person. And pretty inspiring tale, Kevin's story, how he lost his arm and shoulder, lost his football career. And Jay and Betty had the book sitting in front of them. And Jay said, this is the book we want. This is the book we want. And I said, really? I said, you want to do this in the first person? This is going to be an autobiography? Because I'm thinking to myself, here's a guy that's just been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. He's 80 years old. Almost 81. How's this going to work out? And anyway, he said, yeah, that's the way we want to do it. And I said, good. I said, all my life I wanted to be Jay Sigel, and now I get a chance to be Jay Sigel. So, and write in the first person. Mm-hmm. So we got together right away. We started doing it by, Zoom. He was undergoing chemotherapy treatment. I didn't want to bring any germs into the picture, and we just agreed that would be the best way to do it. It was a bit of a challenge because Jay does not like any kind of technology. In fact, all the notes he had ever made for his whole career were all handwritten. I didn't have no typed documents. In fact, I had to have my daughter type everything so I could even understand it. It's basically what he created a whole outline of his life and his career, which was great. So, that was how it started. And we did interviews like 2-3 for as much as 2 hours if he felt well enough a week. That went on almost till so we started in October. That went on almost till Christmas time. And I said, Jay, I got to get started writing. I want you to provide feedback on everything I'm writing. Got started writing. I started sending him chapters. He'd make, little edits or notes, and we'd talk about them. And we went through basically half the book, 16 chapters. The last chapter I completed while he was still living was the U.S. Amateur. That was a good piece, really interesting part of the book for one reason, because I was able to work with his caddy on it, a guy by the name of Steve Davenport, who's now a financial advisor. He was 19 at the time. And Steve was, he was really outstanding. He remembered, tremendous detail that Jay and I never really got deep into. So, and then of course Jay passed away. It was pretty emotional, really. We had really grown close, very close in that like 7 months. I had known him before, but now all of a sudden I'm talking to him every day. I had days where I had 12 calls from him, looking at my phone. Now, typical Jay, about half of them were pocket dials. And I said, did you call me? No. I just, I just rolled over on my phone again. Just very, very intense for that whole period of time. It took a while to regroup. Actually thought about maybe kind of like just telling the reader Jay died at this point, and I had to switch over to the third person for the rest of the book. But I had all the story and I had his voice. We had done all the interviews. We'd recorded all of them. I said, no, I'm just going to try to stay the course on this. It just was a little more tedious. I had to constantly fact check things before I could send it to Jay and say, is this right? He'd correct this or that. But now I couldn't do that. So that made the interviews even more important. Hey, you were playing with Jay. You were his partner. What happened? Here's what he told me. How did that look to you? Or even with like Fred Ridley at Peachtree. Jay went to his grave feeling he was responsible for the first loss by a Walker Cup team, U.S. Walker Cup team on U.S. soil because of what happened at Peachtree. And Fred Ridley and I spoke about that at length, and I'm sure he's going to be talking about it next week at the book kickoff.
Mm-hmm. Billy Andrade, how did you reach out to him, and what was his reaction? And I'm sure there was some colorful language involved in your discussion. So why don't you take it from there?
Billy was a great interview. I had the opportunity to meet Billy years ago. I had booked Peter Jacobson to play in a charity golf tournament I was running, and Peter suddenly lost his brother in the days before the golf tournament and couldn't come out from the West Coast. And the agent sent 2 replacements, as I recall. One of them was a guy with curly hair by the name of Bobby Clampett, and the other one was Billy Andrade. Mm-hmm. And needless to say, they were not only both great, but they both, I never did interview Clampett, but there's a lot of Clampett in the book because Jay and Clampett, had a lot of contact at various championships over the years. With Jay winning one, Clampett winning one. Of course, Clampett, he's just a kid, and Jay by then is 40 years old. But and Jay's a legend. But Andrade was a partner of Jay's in the Walker Cup at Sunningdale in England, and certainly had developed a big reputation. He had actually won the North and South and beat Jay at that time on the last hole. on its way to the North and South. But even still, Billy's kind of a kid still at that time, and Jay is Jay. He's like the biggest thing in amateur golf.
Mm-hmm.
So I was talking, I guess, to a teammate, and I asked him if he had Billy's number. He gave me Billy's number. I left him a text, and the next day I get a call from Billy and answer the phone. Billy says, John, you the guy that wanted to talk to me about the Bobby Jones of my generation? And I said, well, yeah, I guess you could say that. A lot of people have said that. He said, well, what do you want to know? So we got into it a little bit. I think actually he was in an airport on his way to play golf in Mexico. And he told me the story, which I love, which is in the book, in both parts, in Jay's voice as he's playing at Sunningdale, and Fred Ridley is the captain. And Ridley comes to Billy and he says, Billy, I'm going to pair you with Jay. And Billy's like, wow, I'm going to play with Jay in my first Walker Cup, and Jay's the man. And he says, then Jay comes up to me and Jay says, Billy, what do you want to do? You want to hit first off the tee or you want to hit from the fairway? And he says, man, I don't want to hit first. He says, my first Walker Cup. I'm a nervous wreck. I said, oh, no, Jay, I'll just hit from the fairway. That'll be fine with me. And he said, of course, Jay steps up in front of the whole crowd and everything, and he just rips it like 290 down the middle. Because it's a relatively short par 5. And, like no problem for Jay. So we start heading out to the golf ball. And the next thing I know, like a couple of carts start following us, loaded with television equipment, television. I've never hit a shot on television before. He said, oh, my God, I thought I was nervous about the idea of hitting from the first tee. Now they're following me out to the second shot. So he says, we get out there, and he said, all I got left really is a 5-iron. And he says, the pin is tucked way to the left behind the bunker. And he says, so I pull a 5-iron, and I'm getting ready to hit. He said, and Jay moseys over to me and kind of leans up close, and he goes, Billy, nothing fancy here, middle of the green. And Billy goes, it was like the voice of God. He goes like,
I got to tell you a story about that. The voice, yes, because Jay had a very deep voice. So I mentioned I played in a junior golf tournament with him, and the other junior golfer in the group was a young man named Tony from the city, and he wasn't very competitive. He was a nice kid. He had a nice game, but he was not really going to compete for the title. And we were playing a short par 3 at North Hills Country Club, and it had a very the greens are super fast there, always have been. And Tony hit the ball above the hole. And that was the mistake. You could not hit the ball above the hole, because if you didn't make the putt, it could go off the green. Tony ended up 7-putting, and he didn't hit a bad putt. All right. I'm standing next to Jay right off the green, and we're watching it unfold. And I'm just kind of looking at him. He's looking at me, and it's clear that the kid is in distress, and somebody has to say something. And I'm thinking, well, I'm 17. You're a grown man. You got to say something. So Jay goes, Tony holds out. He's walking off the green. I mean, he looked like he needed a hug. And Jay goes, well, Tony, that's too bad, but that's golf. and John, he would have been fine leaving it at that. He said just enough. But then Jay went on. He said, but you know something? That won't be the last time you do that. And I'm thinking, no, Jay, that's a 4-putt under pressure, a 5-putt. Yeah, that's going to happen. A 7-putt, that's once in a lifetime. But it was just like Billy Andre said, the voice of God. and then he got a little in the rough with, like, the suffix that he put on the end of it. Like, I'll never forget it.
Billy said the rest of the story is, he said, I'm so like pumped up. He says, I immediately yank it left and it's straight at the flag, not middle of the green like Jay instructed me. He said, but it flies the bunker and stops about a foot from the hole, or just a couple of feet from the hole. He said, so Jay just walks up, taps it in for eagle. We're one up and go on to win the match.
That's a great story. John, listen, I really enjoyed the conversation with you. 2 parts. In fact, the last time I think we talked, we did 2 parts because I know I'm getting good stuff and you just keep adding to it and adding to it and adding to it. Can't wait for the book to come out, and let's reconnect after the book launch and Fred Ridley's speech and everybody else at Aronimink. Sound like a good idea to you?
Sounds like fun. We'll do it.
All right. Now, where can I've been scrolling it across the screen throughout the conversation. Where can people find the book?
Yes. Right now, we're selling it off the website, siegelgolfbook.com, and you can see it there on your screen. Obviously, if you can make it to Aronimink for your Philadelphia audience, or within, I guess, a couple hours of Philadelphia, because we got people coming in from all over, in addition to Fred Ridley, who's coming from down your way. Mm-hmm. So we, we'll be... The ticket to the event gets you one limited edition hardback signed book. And if you like, you can pick up other copies, or people can show up there and buy other copies. So that's the one other thing in the short term where you'll be able to buy a book will be at Aronimink that day. I think a couple of clubs, maybe Aronimink, I'm not sure yet, but Delray down in Florida and other spots will probably have the book available. We'll have some bookstores with it and other places. So, but mainly for now, the website. Later on, we'll put it on Amazon. But for right now, just take it off the website.
SiegelGolfBook.com. Wish you nothing but success there. I can't wait to take a deeper dive into it. And for everybody else that loves golf and wants like the full detail, as if John didn't give it to you in the 2 parts here, it's all in the book. Just a fascinating person. He really was the next coming of Jack Nicklaus, or the reincarnation of Bobby Jones. Jay Sigel, My Life in Golf, the Jay Sigel autobiography. The Last Amateur, My Life in Golf, the Jay Sigel autobiography written by John Riley. John, thanks so much. As we wrap things up, big thanks to our title sponsor, Party Drinks. If you're looking for a drink alternative on the golf course, try a Party. If you're looking for golf real estate, good time to buy in the greater Sarasota area. Gene Walsh, Samantha Walsh, and Vince Vizzacaro from suncoastdreams.com got you covered. A division of fine properties. And if you're tired of all that golf and you need to unwind and relax, you go to BioLit Spa in downtown Sarasota. For John Riley, I'm Kevin Walsh. We'll see you again next time on Party Time, My Golf Story.
See you, Kevin.
You've been listening to It's Party Time, My Golf Story, brought to you by Party Drinks. Classically designed golf drinks for golfers by golfers, and the golf real estate pros Gene Walsh and Vince Vizzacaro. For your Southwest Florida real estate needs, check them out at suncoastdreams.com or call 941-220-4000.